What's up, everybody? The Money Stop returns. He's Cole Cusumano. I'm Steven Cusumano. And some rare circumstances this week. Cole flying across the country to Kansas. I'm over in New Jersey at a baseball stadium. I work for the Yankees AA affiliate here in Somerset. So as both of us were unable to get on the same schedule, we're coming to a little bit more of a spontaneous episode here. We're going to keep things pretty light, pretty short, sort of an abbreviated episode. We're going to go through our 12 drivers and the things that you must hear as far as the observations Cole has seen at Kansas, where he is at right now, actually at Cup practice as we're taking place here. And then obviously we'll go through some of the odds and the numbers that are going to be important to look at. But we'll go through some of the more niche stuff, our big money bets, the various other bets that you're going to want to look at on social media this week. But we're going to start by just going through our 12 drivers, kind of the bare bones stuff you need to know going into Kansas, and mainly looking for your observations from being with your feet on the ground there, Cole. I do want to first start by getting your thoughts on Darlington, because we talked about it going in. Can't ask for a better race to start the playoffs than the Southern 500. It was a true battle of attrition from the drivers to the teams. Every stage, it took a full, complete race, and it was, of course, Kyle Larson. Who else with Cliff Daniels taking the win at the Southern 500? Long time coming for that team. It was a really, really good race. So many different layers and storylines, and just a lot to look at coming out of that race. So we'll keep the thoughts brief there. Just give me your thoughts. And then, I mean, you're in Kansas right now. You've been there for the weekend, taking in the sights and sounds of Cup Series practice and qualifying and the other national touring series. So where's your mind at right now? I mean, it could be a lot of different places, I guess, Cole.
Well, I'm right behind the previous winner's caller right now, Kyle Larson. And it's been a really fun weekend so far in Kansas. I guess just on Darlington, real quick, you can hear me with the cars. I thought it's a quintessential way to begin the playoff, Southern 500. Just the attrition, the quality of racing. I think what we saw all night was incredible, but specifically those last 10, 15 laps, you had, was it Larson, Busher, Reddick, and I think William Byron at one point. All four cars with a 1 second blanket. You didn't know who was going to win it. Absolutely phenomenal race, and I could not get enough of it. I thought it was perfect 7,500 for the NASCAR 70th anniversary, and just being out here in Kansas right now, it's first of all it's hot, but it's been good. I think I have a pretty good read on certain drivers from the first practice and just making the outline going into the weekend. I think where my head was at going in is kind of where it's staying. So that's always a good thing. And I guess with that, Tuesday practice literally just ended with Tyler Reddick top speed charts, William Byron second, and then Bubba Wallace in third. That being said, 23-11 is looking to be the team to beat here, as they've been in the next gen era at Kansas. Toyota's won all three races with this car at Kansas. 23-11's won two. And I expect more of the same this weekend. I think Reddick posted the best 5 and 10 lap averages from this first practice Group A session. So obviously we'll have more clarity once Group B ends in 20 minutes. But overall, I think after rolling as well the drivers I listed, they'll be more of the same dogs, just sort of a reassurance. And if anything change in regards to those drivers, I'll for sure bring it up.
Yeah, we're going to keep this pretty brief because, again, you're working out there. There's obviously track action all day, whether it's practice, qualifying, Xfinity Series, you name it. So we're going to keep this pretty short, but I want to go through our 12 drivers. I'm going to start with our favorites category, and I'll list all 4 drivers and kind of the reasons why they are in the favorites category. I know you mentioned it on social media earlier this week, Cole, but I'm going to go a little bit more in depth with the numbers, and you can kind of just respond with what you've seen and observed there on with your feet on the ground in Kansas. But in our favorites category, leading off with Kyle Larson at plus 525 and valued at 10,500 in daily fantasy. Runner-up twice and an 8th place finish in 4 starts at Kansas in the next gen era, as well as a win there. 436 laps led over the last 6 races at Kansas. So there is very good reason why Kyle Larson is the second most expensive driver and why he leads off our favorites category. The most expensive driver, though, plus 500 at the shortest odds to win and 11,000 in daily fantasy, is Denny Hamlin. And it's no surprise why. He won here in the spring, 4 wins at Kansas, no finish worse than fourth in 3 next-gen starts, and that is a whopping 2.3 average finish. So good reason why Denny Hamlin should be considered the favorite for this race, riding a 4-race top 5 streak, mentioned the win this year, and a runner-up in this exact race last year. So that's definitely a good place to start, but also William Byron, plus 725 for the victory, 10,200 in daily fantasy. He only has 1 finish outside the top 10 in his last 8 starts at Kansas. Does have an average running position of 18th in the last race here when he finished 3rd in the spring. So maybe a little bit of a fluky finish, but you can say that that team put a full race together in the spring. And he's led laps in the last 4 races at Kansas, as well as 8 in the last 11 races there. So William Byron, certainly a name to watch. And then kind of at the middle of this favorites tier, you've got Martin Truex Jr., who swept this track in 2017 and has 8 straight top 10s at Kansas, including an 8th place in the spring, 906 lap led, which is 2nd overall in the sport at this point in time, and a 6.3 average finish in 3 next-gen starts there, which ranks 4th out of active drivers. So, Cole, that was kind of going into the week what we had analyzed on the outline as far as the numbers indicate for Kansas. But as you see what you've observed, again, especially with the 2311 cars proving to be having really good speed this week, do those 4 kind of hold up to staying in the favorites category as we speak here on about halfway through Saturday right now during Cup practice?
I think, yes, in reference to William Byron, Kyle Larson, and Denny Hamlin, like those stats are just ridiculous. I think they're 3 of the best drivers right now. Hamlin and Byron, I think, 2 of the best drivers all season long. But I have definitely a varying opinion on Truex. Obviously, he has the history and the recency to back up what should be a good day in Kansas. However, last weekend at Darlington was very, very alarming to me because we mentioned going in, he's a lap leading machine there. He always runs very well. He's always contender for the win. That was not the case at all. I think he qualified out back, and he stayed there the entire race. He was a complete non-factor. And for that, I think the most important thing is going to be adapting to the second turn to this track. They did not do that, obviously, going to Darlington. I don't expect them to have a performance like that at Kansas. Toyota's won the last 3 races here, obviously, as mentioned. So I think he's the one favorite that I would probably be weary of, and I would not consider him for DFS. I think, actually, I'm pretty sure that the odds or the DFS values are the same as last week in the favorites tier. And I think you're looking at best value is going to be William Byron for a race winner and for DFS. I think if it's not a Toyota, it's going to be him. But I would even venture out to swap Bubba Wallace as a favorite as opposed to Truex. But we'll talk about him more in depth as a sleeper, just given his value and all that. But I think overall, looking at how Group A practice went, William Byron is definitely going to be one of the contenders for sure, and he's been all season. I think Tyler Reddick and Bubba Wallace are going to be up there as well. And then Denny Hamlin, he's on track right now. Looks like he's 12th overall on the leaderboard. Kyle Larson's 4th overall on the leaderboard now. And I think those would be the 4 drivers: Byron, Larson, Hamlin, Bubba that I'm really looking at, and then Tyler Reddick as well as a legitimate favorite going in.
And that's a perfect segue into our sleepers category because, again, this was kind of what we forecasted going into the week, but we don't usually record on Saturday, and this is a perfect example of how things can change going into the weekend compared to where they are now after you've seen some on-track laps and the cars putting together, seeing how they unloaded. You're looking at those 2311 cars as a couple that are going to be potential favorites. But entering this week, we had that duo as sleepers. And leading off the sleepers category, I'll start with Tyler Reddick, who's plus 900 for the win, which right now is looking like it could be a steal. Coming off the great race last week, he's also valued at 9,800 in fantasy, which is a pretty solid value considering if you consider him a favorite like we do. He finished 9th here in the spring. He's led laps in the last 4 races at Kansas for a total of 91, and he has 3 top 10s in 8 starts with an 18.1 average finish at this track. Well, that being said, he's obviously on a roll right now, and as you mentioned, Cole, the recency of I guess, the short-term memory shows that he's going to be a really good driver to be reckoned with this week. And then I'll jump over to Bubba Wallace, who is kind of a median price driver out of those in the sleepers fringe favorites category. Bubba's plus 1,300 for the victory, 9,200 in daily fantasy. And he's got top 10s in all 3 next-gen starts at Kansas. It is one of his best intermediate tracks. And he's one of 5 drivers that can say that, top 10s in all 3 starts at Kansas, along with Larson, Hamlin, and Truex among those others. He won this race last year, finished 4th in the spring. He's got a 5th place average finish in the next-gen car at Kansas, which is hard to find anyone better than that. It ranks 3rd out of active drivers. And he has a 2-race laps led streak at Kansas, average running position, I should say, of 6th in the last 2 Kansas races as well. So that's a little bit of stats to back up what you have said about the 2311 cars that we looked at as sleepers coming into this week, maybe now becoming favorites as we get towards the end of the weekend. Want to touch on 2 more sleepers, though. One that's highly valued, that's Christopher Bell at plus 1,000 and 10,000 in daily fantasy. So as far as a value out of our sleepers category, Christopher Bell is one of the more high-priced drivers. However, he does have 2 top 5s with the next-gen car at Kansas. Had a wreck here in the spring, so that obviously can be wiped off the resume. A career-best 3rd in this race a year ago, and he's led laps in all 3 next-gen starts at this track. So a hefty price to pay for C-Bell, who looked strong in the first stage of last week's race at Darlington, but obviously could not put the full race together. And then one guy who had the opposite of C-Bell last week, Ross Chastain, had a terrible first stage at Darlington, and that number 1 team rebounded to finish in the top 10. It was a really, really resilient performance. I think we saw a lot of that, which we'll talk more about maybe later on with, how impressive that performance was with Darlington. But as far as a value in the sleepers category, Ross Chastain is the most expensive, or the longest shot to win, at least, at plus 1,500 for the win. 9,000 in daily fantasy is the cheapest driver that we've discussed yet. He has no finish worse than 7th in 3 next-gen starts at Kansas. He's led laps in 2/3 of the races there, a career best 5th in the spring, and coming off not just the top 10, but a top 5 at Darlington. That was one of the most resilient performances we had seen of any team in that long 500-mile race at Darlington. So those 4 drivers seem like really good values to me, between Reddick at plus 900, Bubba at plus 1,300, C-Bell at plus 1,000, and then Ross Chastain at plus 1,500. It wouldn't surprise me to see our driver come from that tier.
No, I completely agree. I think I've spoken enough on my confidence in the 2311 statement, so I'll gloss over that. But in reference to Ross Chastain, I loved what I saw from that team at Darlington. Just an incredible rebound. Like, as you mentioned, they were awful at stage 1, literally on the fringe of going a lap down and rebounded to finish top 5. I don't know if the reins were loosened up and he's able to be more aggressive now or what, but if this is an indicator of what to expect throughout the rest of the playoffs, I think the Cup Series should be on notice that the Mellow Man could be back in victory lane sooner rather than later. But on Christopher Bell, I don't like his values at all. I would, if I'm picking Toyota, I'm picking Denny, Bubba, or Reddick. Bottom line, I think his value is way too steep. I think the speed's been there. That's obvious. But you mentioned it. They've had trouble all season closing out races, and it's been a lot of bad luck, which you really can't forecast. But I just think there's too much inconsistency and not enough results to back up having a lot of confidence in Christopher Bell. And not to mention, he did not finish top 15 in practice. So I don't know. I don't like what I've seen from that team going into playoffs, and honestly all season. Like, again, speed's been there, that's obvious, but just in reference to him against the other Toyota drivers going into this race and just their season as a whole, I wouldn't touch him honestly. But yeah, I feel good about Bubba and Reddick, and then Ross Chastain as well. Ross he finished 14th in practice, so respectable. I think lowest finish of 7th is definitely really good with this next-gen car at Kansas. I think he has this track figured out. And, you want to see the results. You want to see consistency. He has that here. And I think leaving Darlington after that really, really epic rebound was a shot in the arm for that team, and it should be a good thing going forward for Kansas.
And those are the types of performances that will advance you in the playoffs. And I mentioned we hadn't seen the consistency out of that one team all year, but those are the kinds of races that will literally save your season and get you a chance to advance into the round of 12 and so forth in the playoffs. So that was a really, really encouraging performance from my perspective too. Let's jump into our value picks because we've talked a lot about these drivers in the top 8 of our kind of rankings entering the week, but really good values this week to look at as well. And I'm curious to hear what your thoughts are on these 4 drivers, beginning with the most expensive of the 4, Alex Bowman, who is valued at 7,800 in daily fantasy. He's got top 10s in both next-gen car starts, made with over 100 laps led at Kansas. Moderate floor, but a very high ceiling with 7 top 10s and 15 starts, and about a 16th place average finish it. And the recency with the next-gen car to back it up outside of this year in 2023. He's a good gamble, as is Chase Elliott, who's only valued at $8,100 this week. So I'll let you touch on them for a moment. And then before that, I'll get into these other 3 drivers, though, Cole. Ricky Stenhouse Jr., 7,300, the value in daily fantasy. Just been so solid this season, and especially at Kansas. He needs one more really good finish to keep his head above water because he is 4 points below the cut line, a 16.7 average finish in 3 next-gen starts at Kansas. So we'll see what Ricky Stenhouse brings to the table. And then also want to touch on Daniel Suarez. Had a solid high-end top 15 play and good equipment, looking strong to end this year. And then 10th in this race a year ago, 15th in the spring, and 4 top 15s over the last 5 races at Kansas. For Suarez, who's valued at 7,500. And then the cheapest driver out of our values is Austin Dillon, a non-playoff driver who has 1 top 10, 12.3 average finish in 3 next-gen starts at Kansas, and a 16th place average finish in 20 starts overall at this track. So it's kind of a mixed bag of value picks there. I think we agree that the value is good, but if I'm looking to place a bet on any of these drivers, I'm looking at how they've unloaded and what the speed is like. So what have you observed there at Kansas?
Yeah, so I like Stenhouse a lot actually this weekend. We've got consistency all season long, and that will get you into the next round, which is round of 16. So he's not going to go out there and win the race. He's not going to try to win the race. But if he can just keep the nose clean like he's done all season and get a top 15 finish, which he's proven that he could do his entire career in Kansas, I think he'll be a really, really good driver to have in your DFS lineup. And then as far as Daniel Suarez, looks like right now he is 16th on the leaderboard in practice. Another team kind of similarly to Christopher Bell on a less successful scale, but if so, obviously the equipment's there. Also got front side, and it's very hard to beat that team, but I think it's because of the equipment. In regard to him and Alex Bowman, I'm looking for safety really for the value pick this week. And on Alex Bowman real quick, I put him in there because of the value. I think Chase Elliott is a much better value, $300 more expensive with an 8,100. But the thing with Alex Bowman is he didn't make that start earlier this year, and I think that really could hurt him going into this race. He knows that big notebook, and all these other teams have that. So, I don't even see him on the top 15 of practice charts right now. So I would definitely name Chase Elliott. He's 10th right now. He's really, really good at this track. I think he has a top 3 average finish throughout the field. A little bit of a mixed bag results as far as next gen era at Kansas, but I'm not worried about that. They're still going for an Owners' Championship, and it's the team that's not going to lay it down in these final 9 races. But just to give you some more names, looking at the leaderboard right now, Eric Jones in 9th. I don't really like how he ran last week, so I don't know how much I would incline him for a value pick for DFS, but we also have Todd Gilliland in 11th. And yeah, I mean, I like Ricky a lot. I think Austin Dillon will one that's not hard to go with and even the lack of speed to back that up. So I don't know. It's tough only because I like Shakespeare doing DFS, and for that, look at the drivers in better equipment. And there are drivers in that equipment, like it's in the Trackhouse racing, that you can fit in your lineup that are below that average remaining salary recommendation. So it's a matter of punching that out. I'll have a better idea once practice is actually over, so I can go over all the lap averages and such. But yeah, I guess that's kind of my all over the place thought on the values with Kansas.
Well, I'm glad we had a chance to touch on those dozen drivers there. I've mentioned that this is going to be a pretty abbreviated episode because we just wanted to dive a little bit more into the numbers and obviously the observations that you had. There's still a lot more business to get to. We're not going to do it right here on this episode. We're going to do a lot of social media coverage this week, though. So stay tuned on at @the_money_stop social media. Cole and I are going to tweet out individual videos of our race winner and sleeper picks. We'll have a daily fantasy lineup. And obviously, Cole is going to be on the ground at Kansas posting pictures of all the paint schemes as well for our nickel or dime segment. But I think we're going to cap it there. That just kind of is a brief overview of the 12 drivers that we saw coming in, and then a couple of bonus drivers that Cole has observed. And I think this is just a really important week to stick on social media at @the_money_stop and at Cole Cusumano, Cole_Cusumano_ on Twitter. But Cole, let you get back to doing your work down there at Kansas Speedway. And again, picking up some really great notes for us that we're going to keep an eye for on social media. So keep an eye on those 12 drivers, certainly, but also stay posted at @the_money_stop as we take a look at developing storylines throughout the week. Cole and I are going to tweet out our race winners and our sleepers and a daily fantasy recommended lineup and some other bonus content as well. So thank you all so much for tuning in and stay posted. There is more to come on social media at @the_money_stop. Gotta make 'em wanna come back for more.